And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guest on this next interview. Russian President Vladimir Putin and Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian met in Turkmenistan to discuss growing economic and political cooperation. Now, with shared views on global issues, both leaders emphasized the need to deepen ties to counter Western influence, particularly in light of sanctions. The upcoming BRICS summit in Russia is expected to finalize a strategic agreement between the two nations. Joining us today on TVP World to discuss this is Mark Katz, professor in the Scholar School of Policy and Government, George Mason University. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So can you help us explore the deepening partnership between Russia and Iran, and how might that affect global geopolitics?
Well, obviously, you know that Russia and Iran have been cooperating, since their joint intervention in Syria. I guess Russia joined Iran's in 2015, and obviously since the war in Ukraine in 2022, Russia's been turning to Iran for armed drones, now for missiles, other forms of assistance. So, yeah, the partnership is pretty important. They both have a common anti-Western viewpoint, and they both see themselves as beleaguered by the West. So they have a lot to cooperate on, even though in the past there have been significant differences between Russia and Iran, and there are still certain things they disagree on. But they seem to manage to agree to disagree because their common desire to work together against the United States and the West is more important to them both.
All right, so would you say that their alignment is less of seeing eye to eye on significant issue, but more of the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of situation?
Well, it is that. It's the enemy of my enemy is my friend, but is also, they both have very strong leadership anti-Western ideologies. In other words, this is something that's very deeply emotional for both of them. They both feel strongly aggrieved by the United States, by the West in general. So I think it's, in other words, with the enemy of my enemy is my friend logic, it seems that something could change if one side makes peace with one of the enemies. But I don't think this is going to be happening in the case of Russia and Iran, so long as they are under their current set of leaders.
Right. Now, we do know that the BRICS summit in Russia will take place in Russia, and Iran might just be invited into the organization. Now, I've heard, various different experts giving their different opinion when it comes to BRICS. Some say that it's something that the West should be pretty alarmed by, saying that it might be a big economic body that can indeed rival the U.S. in the West. Some others are saying that, it's a bit overhyped, it'll never really take off. What's your perspective when it comes to that?
But just one correction. Iran did join BRICS already. It was invited a year ago, and they took up their membership this past January, along with Egypt, United Arab Emirates, Ethiopia. Argentina was invited, but declined under its new leader. And the Saudis, very mysteriously, they were invited, have not yet formally accepted, but haven't actually renounced it either. Anyway, so yeah, Iran is definitely a member. I guess the question now is, will there be more countries invited? I suspect that there will be. The problem with the BRICS is that as it expands in particular, there are some countries like Russia, Iran, and even China to a certain extent, which really are anti-Western. But there are other countries who are members, India, United Arab Emirates, let's say that Saudis are a member, even Egypt, want to cooperate with the West, but also cooperate with Russia, China in particular. And of course, at the heart of the BRICS, the two biggest members, China and India, are increasingly at odds with each other. And it's not clear that the BRICS format allows that problem to be resolved. Similarly, as it expands, more conflicts seem to be involved. We see Egypt and Ethiopia increasingly at odds with each other. and of course Iran with the United Arab Emirates, with Saudi Arabia in particular. So it's not clear to me that the BRICS really is a truly functioning, effective organization. But I think for the members, it looks good. In other words, it's sort of the non-Western leaders getting together, but they haven't really been able to agree upon much more than just expanding the membership.
So as it currently stand, maybe the idea of going into a multipolar world where US and the EU leads one and the BRICS leads the other is perhaps a little bit overblown.
Right. In other words, it won't be BRICS leading anything. In other words, it may be China leading several nations. Certainly Russia has some nations that seem to follow its lead, but I don't think the BRICS as a whole will form a cohesive bloc by any means. And the more it expands, I think the less cohesive it will be. It's just simply a talking forum more than anything else.
Right. And going back to Russia and Iran, a meeting between Vladimir Putin and the Iranian president, do you think that there's going to be more strategic partnership between Russia and Iran that might lead to more collaboration in military and security matters that perhaps might impact the war in Ukraine?
Well, I think that we're not going to see less cooperation, that we're going to see more, it seems to me. But so far, it seems to be kind of a one-way street. In other words, the Iranians are sending drones, missiles, advisors, apparently, even to Russia. But Iran hasn't been able to get as much as it would have liked from Russia. In other words, Russia promised the Su-35 fighter jets, S-400 air defense missile systems, and for some mysterious reason, these have not been forthcoming. Now, maybe they will be, but it seems that that Vladimir Putin does not reciprocate. Even if you do things to help him, he doesn't necessarily do things to help you if he doesn't see it as in his interest. And the speculation is that Putin doesn't want to upset his relations with Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates in particular, because unlike Iran, these countries do have choices, that they principally relied upon the U.S. They've begun cooperating with Russia while continuing to cooperate with the U.S. I think he's afraid that if Russia gives too much assistance to Iran, the Saudis and the Emiratis in particular will scurry back toward the United States.
So with all that taken into account, do you think that this cooperation and alliance is sustainable, seeing that perhaps one benefits a lot more than the other?
Well, I think that, in fact, I wrote something recently on this. I think that Iran, obviously, they don't like this, but, as we've seen with the Iranians, what they want is for other people to fight the West, whether it's the Hezbollah, whether it's the Houthis or the Iraqi militias, and that for them, I think Russia is just one more militia. In other words, that it's worth Iran's while to help Russia, even if Russia doesn't help Iran all that much, because with Russia fighting against Ukraine and Western-backed Ukrainian forces, means that Iran doesn't have to be so much involved. So I think it's part of the Iranian repertoire that they don't mind it when they'll support other people fighting their opponents and not try to do so themselves.
Right. And then I want to explore a little bit about sanctions, because one of the things that perhaps brought Russia and Iran together is actually their alignment against Western sanctions. Do you think that perhaps the West's move of isolating these countries such as Russia and Iran would actually end up driving them together?
Well, I think that's happened already. In other words, that both are under severe sanctions, and so it's really not surprising that they're cooperating with each other economically. And most importantly, is that both are cooperating with China. The trouble with, I think, American sanctions is that the United States has sanctioned too many countries. Instead of focusing on a few, we sanctioned a lot of countries, and they now have an interest in cooperating with each other. The key is China. If China economically cooperates with other countries that are under sanction, then I think that these countries can all get by. Maybe they won't prosper, I don't think their government's particularly worried about that, but that that the Western sanctions simply aren't as effective. And I think, increased sanctions have diminishing marginal returns. In other words, there's so many sanctions on Russia and Iran already that imposing more on them is not going to really be very effective.
All right. Thank you so much for your input and insight and helping us understand this situation a little bit more. Really appreciate it. And thanks for being with us on TVP World.
Thank you.
Cheers. And thank you for watching this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.